The first drives of the Tesla Cybertruck broke the internet recently, but those were in the US, so while we're waiting for one to come to the UK, we thought we'd go right back to the beginning, to the car that started the company and had Clarkson up in court. The original Tesla. These cars came on the scene in 2008 and they have their roots based firmly in the UK. I imagine many of you guys and girls will already know this, but you take a good look at this car, you'll realise it's a Lotus. It's a Lotus Elise to be precise, although it's not that simple because this chassis is apparently 6 inches longer than a Series 2 Elise, which in engineering terms is actually quite an extensive change. The Series 2 Elise actually is the basis for a whole bunch of cars from this era. How many can you recall off the top of your head? Have a think and I'll go through the list later in the video. The thing is, this car got one Mr. Clarkson into quite a lot of trouble. Elon Musk decided that BBC Top Gear had thrown his car under the bus, faking issues with it on the test and misrepresenting his product. On the show, Clarkson said the car ran out of juice in just 55 miles, the brake stopped working, and by using just a 3-pin socket, he said it would take 13 hours for it to charge back up again. He also referred to it as a brown rice eco car. The Tesla had a pretty tough time of it. Tesla decided to take things to court, suing the BBC for libel in 2011, but the court fell in favour of the BBC, saying that no one in their rightful mind would believe that the car would perform like that in real life. I must say, I disagree with that opinion. When Clarkson gives out his opinion to his millions of viewers, it's scary how many of them take on that opinion as their own. How many times have you been at a car meet or car show and, for example, heard someone say, you cannot be a petrolhead unless you've owned an Alfa Romeo? Considering Tesla was a fledgling company at that time, that review will have had a huge impact on them, and it's actually governed how they've done their PR ever since. I don't think Elon loses any sleep about it these days. Is he still the richest man in the world? I think he is. Anyway, was Jeremy Clarkson right about the Tesla Roadster? Was it a complete disaster? What I love is when you watch back the first reviews of this car, notably the Clarkson and Jay Leno reviews. They're coming out with all these tropes that we just completely take for granted now, but were a big deal back in the day. Clarkson is ecstatic that this thing can do 200 miles on one charge. Nowadays, you'd barely get away with that in a tiny little EV city car. But back then, compared to all the sort of homemade crappy EVs that had come out before, this thing was pretty mind-boggling. Jay Leno also makes a quip about, oh, can you drive it in the wet? You know, it's stuff that we can laugh at now, but back in 08-09, these were genuine questions. It shows just how fresh this car was, how ahead of the game it was. The leading journalists at the time were literally taking steps into the unknown. Pretty cool. The seats are heated. I've got my heated seat on. I'm probably absolutely annihilating my battery with that. And on to the battery. That's an interesting one. It's something that I'm really keen to see in this test. How are the batteries back there faring after 15 years? It's that big thing about second-hand EV ownership. You have definitely missed out on the best of that battery. It's not like an internal combustion engine that, you know, could take some time to run in. It's only going to be depleting, like your mobile phone battery or laptop battery. What's interesting is, despite the basis of the car, the chassis, being created in the UK, because most of the value of the car, being all the electronic components, were put in California, it is classed as a California, US-based car. One thing I did not expect was the regen braking. I thought that would be a technology that would come in way later with Tesla, but it's here. On the very early cars, there's actually a rev counter that goes up to 13,000 RPM. Well, this has just got a speedometer, which is very Lotus, and then on the right, there's your energies. You're in the white when you're on the power, and then it flicks off into the green, so kind of plus 30 kilowatts, putting it back in. I did not expect that in this early a Tesla. Fair play, Elon.
Another question. Does an EV stay as savagely quick off the line 15 years on?
3, 2, 1, go. 40, 50, 60. The 0 to 25 is really impressive. Supercar quick. It really tails off after that. I wonder if that is also affected by the electric motors being 15 years old. Maybe when it first came out, it still had that edge, but compared to a modern Tesla, they don't give away that power anywhere near as quickly as this thing is. It's got the equivalent of 288 horsepower in this sport version. The very first cars only had about 240-ish. So it's that classic early EV thing of not having too much power, but it all comes very quickly. So that first initial push is really impressive and would outdo most internal combustion cars. This versus a standard Series 2 Elise, it wouldn't even be a competition, whether it's up a hill, on a track, or just a drag race. No chance. This thing would absolutely annihilate the Lotus. Bloody hell, it's quick. It's good! It's good! On paper, its 0 to 60 is 3.9, and it did set a Top Gear lap time of 1 minute 27.2, which is the same as a GT3 on a mildly moist track. Impressive. It was all going so well, and then it became a 15-year-old Tesla. We left with about 70% battery today, and it very quickly has gone down to like high 20s just through driving it quite sprightly on a British country road. And of course, being the UK, there's only 2 chargers in this entire area, which are currently filled with a commercial van and a private car over there.
Little did I know how much of a disaster this charging fiasco would be. After waiting 20 minutes for a space to free up, the Instavolt Chadabo charger was out of order. I then had no other choice but to bail, full to the brim with range anxiety, to an AC charger at a local pub that thankfully just so happened to be in range.
Okay, which cable is it? Out you come, sonny. Oh, you're a chonker. Oh, you should keep going. This puppy. Aren't EVs great? Touch here. You've been touched. Card payment. Oh, start charge. F***ing hell. What is this? So we're no longer in Chodamo or wherever that was. Slide this baby in. Twist. We might have only lost 3 hours from this shoot. Godspeed. Approved. Select your connector. AC. That was a click. Come on, baby. There's so much clicking going on. It's gone blue. It's charging!
After a full hour of charging, we managed to gain 12 miles of range. How long do you think it would take to fill 12 miles of petrol or diesel? Beyond ridiculous.
So, the list of cars that a Series 2 Elise is the basis of. I'm going to have to try and remember them myself. So, the Tesla Roadster, the Lotus Exige, then there's the slightly weird one, the Lotus Europa. I imagine that will have slipped many of your memories. Then there was the 211 Lotus, that was that open-top track day type thing. Then there was the Hennessy Venom, the, what was it, 270 mile an hour car that had a really stretched Series 2 chassis. That car seems terrifying. Of course, the Vauxhall VX220 Turbo, I'd love to go in one of them. There's a whole list of others as well, so clearly the Series 2 Elise was an amazing little car that so many other car companies thought, do you know what, we could do with a bit of that. And Elon was one of them. It shows, no matter what you think of Elon, he clearly knows his cars by picking this. I mean, for Christ's sake, the man owned a McLaren F1. I think he did crash his McLaren F1, but it seems like everyone crashed theirs back in the day. Are you gonna rib him and not rib Rowan Atkinson? I think a lot of modern EV manufacturers should look at this car, should have another go in it, especially Porsche. Not saying they don't know what they're doing, but if I was someone that was designing the next Boxster or Cayman, and we all know that's going to be electrified fairly soon, I think this is actually a great benchmark. Don't go Taycan and sort of Model 3, Model S down. Start with something as simple as this and go up. With improved battery technology and electric motors, maybe you could squeeze getting on to 300 miles of range out of something like this nowadays. That would be a really, really impressive car. Something I struggle to fathom is the price of these cars now. From factory, they were expensive. They were £92,000. That was effectively 3 times an Elise at the time. They bottomed out in the US at the equivalent of about £35,000 over here. But since then, people have clearly been sitting on them, and they've crept up and up. Drew Wheeler Sports and Classics that have been looking after this car, they've been selling Tesla Roadsters throughout the years, and Drew was telling me this morning, he got in when they were about 60, and then he was suddenly selling them for 80, and then 100, and then 120. He is selling Tesla Roadsters now for £150,000. And that seems to be a bit of a bargain. If you look at the other cars in the UK, they nearly touch 200 grand. 200 grand for a Lotus Elise with an electric motor. It's punchy, but then again, they only made 2,500 of these cars. They were the first of a kind. They were rare. They're quite good. And there's now a halo effect around Tesla. They're a desirable brand to be seen in. Nowadays, when you get into a car that's this size, it makes you think, why are we kicking about in such enormous things? I mean, to be fair, I've turned up to the shoot in Richard's TRX pickup truck, so I couldn't have gone further up the scale. But on a south of England country road, this car fits. And it's quick, and it grips, wants to turn in. That's it. I'm really enjoying it. I get Clarkson had his gripes back in the day, but the Tesla Roadster is a cracking little car. Let's think about a hypothetical situation. Let's say next week, all the governments across the world ban the internal combustion engine. You can only be electric. What would genuine drivers, people that really want to feel a car on a country road like this, tucking in, accelerating out of a corner, maybe even getting a little bit sideways, feeling that chassis doing its thing, what would they go for? Yes, there's a whole load of stuff like, you know, Taycans and Model 3s and maybe even the new Tesla Roadster, but they're all so heavy. Yes, this is half a ton heavier than the Lotus it's based on, but it's still frickin' light, and it's quick, and it stops, and it loves an apex. I would go for one of these, I think. The second gen Tesla Roadster that's supposed to do 250 miles an hour and 60 in under 2 seconds has been delayed and delayed and delayed. We were supposed to see it in 2019 in production form, but 5 years on, we've not seen a sniff of it. Elon Musk said back in 2022 it was down to part supply. Now what? The original Tesla Roadster then, it may seem expensive for what it is, but considering it moved the entire industry away from lead-acid batteries to lithium-ion, and in doing so sparking an entire electric car revolution, and it costs as much as a deposit for a second-gen Roadster, maybe it's worth a punt. or buy a 911 GT3. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I've been Mike, and don't forget to subscribe to DRIVETRIBE.